All right, good morning, EdPsych students, and welcome to week 10 this week, I want to say. We're getting surprisingly close to the end of the semester, and I don't know if it feels that way at all or not, but we have covered a ton of content, and we're kind of getting to that point where things start to blur together, and there's really only so many weeks left in this course. So I'm kind of shocked when I think that we've got 6 weeks left and a finals week, and then that's it. That this class is over. So finish strong. I hope this class doesn't feel like you're trudging through anything. I hope it feels like there's a lot of useful material and content, but I also realize that we've been doing this in an online format, so it's probably not quite as personalized. But yeah, I'm excited about this week. We finished up kind of our engagement science and learning processing theory module last week, and I had you guys do a lesson plan. That was a highly engaging lesson plan that was using some principles from the studies, and then you created an example, and I haven't graded them yet. I don't even think I've collected them all yet. So if you haven't done that yet, you need to make sure you complete both parts of that assignment. There's the lesson plan, there's the assignment sheet, and then there's the example. Make sure you do all three of those. But we are moving on to a new 3-week module on self-regulated learning, also known as SRL. And let me just take a quick moment to preview these 3 weeks. We're going to have one goal per week. And the way I kind of want to do this is I want the first goal to be defining SRL and the concepts associated with SRL. Then I want you to learn during week 2 the actual strategies and practices that are used to incorporate SRL into your classroom. And I think what you'll actually find is there's a lot of overlap with engagement science, but in addition to that, you're going to just see this is really just good teaching. It's interesting to me that SRL is probably one of the hallmark learning theories, or I guess you could even call it, it's almost like its own pedagogy in EdPsych, but it's also just, this is how schools really ought to be getting their teachers geared towards SRL. So I think if we can do this well, it makes a massive difference in our classrooms, and it's very, very practical. So this first week's not going to be very practical. I'm just going to give you theory, and then it gets highly, highly practical next week, and then we'll end our 3 weeks with another lesson plan assignment. That's an SRL-based lesson plan. So that is the goal. That's the trajectory we are on. I'm going to actually adjust this just a little bit. There we go. I think that's better. My face seems darker now. Move this. That's all right. Not perfect, but let me just try putting something right here. That's better. Hey, that'll work. I'll let it work. Okay. So we're going to define SRL this week, and this is going to be kind of a vocab heavy week. I think you need to learn the vocab though in order to take part in the conversation. Let me actually close this. Let's try this. Yeah, that's much better. So SRL, like I said, I believe this is a highly practical thing for your classrooms. And it is, in a way, a culmination of so many different things we've talked about in this class. So I'm excited to go over it, but I don't think we can go over it correctly if we don't spend a while on terms. And we're going to cover a lot of terms here. So we're going to talk, and these are not the only ones, but we're going to obviously define self-regulated learning, SRL. We're going to then lead into a conversation about metacognition, socio-emotional learning. We're going to review the zone of proximal development, which is a key concept from earlier in the course. And then we're going to talk about these 3 little bundles: self-efficacy, growth mindset, and resilience. So stay tuned to the end to get my hot take on those 3 key terms. All right, let's get into it. Self-regulated learning is a broad term, in education psychology that refers to one's ability to understand and control their learning environment. So when we talk about SRL, there's the teaching side, the teacher side, which is creating the conditions and repeatedly teaching behaviors and modeling instruction a certain way so that students are the ones in the driver's seat. So SRL, when it says self-regulated learning, it's not, the self here is student, right? This is a student's self-regulation of their learning. It therefore refers to the student's ability to know the learning situation that they are the best at, right? That's the first step. The students in your class knowing how they learn most effectively. Then the next linchpin is that the students are then able to identify the learning situation that they are in. So they know what the best learning situation is for themselves. They also are able to identify other types of learning situations. And then best yet, SRL says students should be able to make adjustments to their learning situation in order to be in the learning situation they thrive in. Okay? So I've heard some students in my classes before be like, man, I'm just really not, I just don't think this way. This type of work just doesn't connect with me. You know, listening to a video and taking notes isn't how I learn. Well, SRL would then, for that student, not necessarily say, don't watch the video or tell your teacher to change the video. SRL would say, use this video as step one, but figure out how you can learn the topic and go do it. So the emphasis is almost entirely on the students being the primary means through which learning occurs, not the teacher. Again, that's kind of a hot take. This is more cognitivist than constructionist or constructivist, excuse me, because a cognitivist really centers the brain at the center of learning, versus a constructivist centers the social interaction. This really is, SRL is saying what happens in a kid's head is mainly up to them, and learning takes place when students know how they learn. So this leads us to a few branches. There's three branches. I'm gonna this is a debate, right? And education psychology, it's not like everything is just agreed on perfectly. The three branches of SRL are metacognition, socio-emotional learning, which we've covered already in here, and resilience, which resilience is a debated topic, and I actually do not include it on my list of SRL. I believe SRL really is focused on metacognition and SEL, social-emotional learning, and the resilience component is tricky, and we're going to get to that at the end of this video. So self-regulated learning, just continue with that definition. It's really closely tied to intrinsic motivation, where students are taking the learning into their own hands for personal reasons versus a behavior. So in other words, if a student's going to complete an assignment at a high quality or high level, they're doing so for reasons that are internal. It's not necessarily because of eligibility or because the teacher is going to give them an award. We could have the debate in here on whether grades are intrinsic or extrinsic motivation. Are they doing it just for a grade, or are they finding themselves doing it because they want to learn? And making learning the center of your classroom and the desire to learn the center of your students' goals is kind of the hope of SRL, that students are going to learn because they want to learn, not because they want to earn a grade, not because they want to be eligible, not for a variety of other reasons. They're learning because they want to learn. So in order to really foster this type of intrinsic motivation, students need to learn how they learn. And so that's what I have this note. It's SRL is often just sometimes equated to learning how you learn, students learning how they learn, which is really more metacognition than anything. I've even heard SRL called, this is how smart people think. I actually think it's somewhat true. and I like hate to pigeonhole thought processes and call some people smarter than other. I don't really like that. But if you really were to take a deep dive at some of the folks in the world that are really highly, highly intelligent and doing unbelievably creative and ingenious things, those people are keenly aware of how they learn. Those people are keenly aware that not every teacher, whether it's YouTube or whether it's a physical person or whether it's a book, is that is a single modality, that is a single learning style. And those people know how they learn, and they go, I'm going to use these other things kind of as a launch pad, but when I really want to learn something, this is what I do. So yeah, and then finally, we're going to talk about SEL as well, which is social emotional learning. Don't confuse SRL with SEL. SEL, socio emotional learning, is a branch of SRL, self-regulated learning. They're very easy to confuse, and not just because the letters are similar. Actually, some people just think SEL and SRL are the same thing. They are not. We'll get into that though. Okay, the very, very first term is metacognition. Well, I guess this is the second term, but metacognition is this. It's one's awareness of how they learn most effectively and why. Okay, so this is you knowing how you learn. So it includes your self-awareness of your learning preferences. So if you remember the VARK we did in week 2, some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners, some people are reading and writing, some people are kinesthetic. That's you being, I'm really not a reading, writing learner. I'm more of a hands-on learner, kinesthetic, right? But it's not just being aware of it. It's also your ability to adapt your learning preferences to instructional styles. So who your teacher is, if you have a strong metacognition, who your teacher is never determines how much you learn. You determine how much you learn. Okay, the agency is all on you. So if you have a strong sense of metacognition, you might think things like, I know that in order to do well on this test, I know that I need to review this concept from the textbook. You know what you don't know. You know what you know as well as what you don't know, okay? Or another thing you might say is, I probably need to talk to the teacher about X concept from last week's lesson. In other words, you can identify that it's not just the textbook reading that you need to go in and talk to the teacher. Or it might even be the upcoming assessments of paper, so I'll need to get started on it this week to make sure I get it done how I want to. You're aware of your time management in the learning process. Yeah, I'm going to do a paper, and I'm the type of person that takes 3 weeks to do a paper, so I better start on it soon. Okay, so this is very school-based examples. This can also go outside of school though, but people with strong metacognition are literally able to identify how they learn, why they learn, the type of time management they need to apply to different learning tasks, the type of help they need to ask for in order to best get the concept. So that's really metacognition. It's a self-awareness of your learning and what you don't know. That's so important. I would say that I have this one next because metacognition really relies on students being aware of their own zone of proximal development. You already know what this is. It's a theory from Lev Vygotsky. It states that any given learning concept falls in a range, which is what students already know without help, what the student could know with help, and what the student could not know even with help. And remember this, the help component, this middle one, particularly the students being able to do something with help from someone who knows it, is called scaffolding. Jerome Bruner, 1982. Someone with a strong sense of metacognition actually is able to identify, this is what I could know with help, right? It's from a student point of view. Rather than the teacher saying, hey, Jimmy needs to know this, and I think Jimmy could learn this if we did X, Y, and Z. Jimmy himself is going, I think I could learn this if I got these resources and I was explained in this way, okay? So students who have a high level of metacognition, know all three of these. Students with a high degree of metacognition know what they already know what they could do with help, and know what they cannot do even with help. Okay? That is why the zone of proximal development kind of feeds into this SRL principle of metacognition. Okay? I remember this really clear moment. I was taking chemistry and we were going over stoichiometry. I'm not sure if you guys have had to do stoichiometry in your life, but it was a concept that I really, really struggled with. And yet I didn't know I needed to ask for help on it. So I was doing really, really poor on my assignments. I was not connecting with the teacher. I was not connecting with the content. I didn't feel like I could ask the teacher for help. And I found myself in a situation where I didn't know how to do stoichiometry, and I didn't know what I needed to do to learn it. So I lacked metacognition in that moment. I ended up going and talking to some friends who understood it, and they were able to walk me through it. But it was actually a lot more harder than it needed to be because I lacked that metacognition. So I kind of fought the fact that I couldn't learn rather than say, and I used the excuse, I kept saying like, well, the teacher just sucks. Like, this teacher can't help me. This teacher's not explaining it how it connects with me. I lacked that self-regulation and that ability to go, I need to go figure this out in another way, which is what SRL would tell you to do. Okay, moving on. Oops, back. The other branch of of self-regulated learning is socio-emotional learning. So like I said, I believe in two branches. The two branches are metacognition and then socio-emotional learning. Socio-emotional learning is the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, and establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. So in other words, socio-emotional learning is exactly what it sounds like. It is students having the ability to socialize and emotionally regulate themselves in a school environment or just in a personal setting. It's different than SRL because socio-emotional learning is really focused on students being able to manage emotions and empathize for others, manage their relationships, be kind, be responsible. This is more of a life skill than a learning principle, right? SEL really is hopefully something we all are working on. We could call it social-emotional intelligence, and it just becomes a factor of human identity. It's not necessarily a learning trajectory, even though it's called social-emotional learning in a school setting. SRL really is adding that metacognitive aspect to this, where the student is able to use their relationships and control their emotions in a way that allows them to get help in a certain modality when necessary to get a certain learning outcome. Let me say that again. Self-regulated learning uses socio-emotional learning and metacognition in tandem by asking students to be able to be mature enough to get help as they need it to learn certain concepts. Okay? It's hopefully not too confusing, but I know that these things run into each other. SEL is one thing that's tricky, but it's both developmental and acquired. I remember teaching a lot of SEL lessons in my 7th grade class. I tend to think it's more nature than nurture, but not necessarily nature in a genetic sense, just more of a home sense. It seems like a lot of students that come from homes where socio-emotional development is pigeonholed for any reason, teaching it is not always effective. Feels like when we teach it, it almost seems like we're just bringing out the problems, not necessarily looking for the solutions. So it's really, really hard to teach, but it's important to teach. Let's continue moving forward. The next term that I want to bring up is a juicy one, and it's growth mindset. A lot of people, as they talk about SRL, bring up the growth mindset. Here's what the growth mindset is. Per understood.org, it is the belief that even if one struggles with certain skills and goals and hard work, they can succeed. I added the hard work component because it's implicit. It is based on the theory that skills, capabilities, and success is malleable, meaning there is nothing in somebody, in any person, that ever caps what they can do in this world. We are all capable of anything we set our minds to. That's what the growth mindset says. And it is very often associated with resilience. Specifically, the growth mindset is trying to help students view their failures, their hardships, their difficulties as opportunities and as pieces of the puzzle in the learning process. The opposite, which would make sense, is that students have this attitude that they cannot change the outcome of their life despite hard work, skill development, and goals. Right. So the opposite of the growth mindset is what's called the fixed mindset. And that's a student believing, I'm never going to change. I'm just not smart. It's not about, there's no effort, there's no skill development, there's no willingness to move forward and learn. So it is linked to self-efficacy, which is our next term, by the way. But I'm just going to give you a very quick heads up, and then I'm going to explain why at the end of this video. I'm not a huge fan of the growth mindset, and we'll get to those reasons soon. Okay, self-efficacy is the next term. It's very closely linked to growth mindset. They're slightly different. Self-efficacy, per the American Psychological Association, refers to an individual's belief in his or her capacity to execute behaviors necessary to produce specific performance attainments. The key here, it's different than the growth mindset because of the specific performance attainments here. The growth mindset is like this holistic, overarching belief in oneself. If I do the hard work, I can do anything. It's the belief with the right attitude, I can do whatever I want. I'm capable of everything in this world. Success can't slow me down. Self-efficacy is more like, I can study really hard and pass this test. I can work really hard and complete this paper. It's looking at those specific performance attainments. It's still belief. It's still self-belief. It's still belief in oneself, but it's at a specific thing. So yeah, it's regarding a task, not a holistic mindset. I'm going to give you just a quick example. The growth mindset would just essentially say, I don't use astrophysics. I know nothing about astrophysics. I've never taken a physics class, and I've never taken an astrology class. I've hardly even taken chemistry, for that matter. I've hardly done anything with science since I was in high school. The growth mindset would be me looking at astrophysics and saying, I can do it. I can go work for NASA. You know what? I'm not loving being a teacher at GCC. I'm going to go work for NASA instead. That's the growth mindset. Self-efficacy is me saying, you know, I think I'm going to go get a master's in astrophysics even though I've never done it before. There's a difference there. One is saying I'm capable of anything and everything if I work hard enough. One's saying I think I can do this one specific task correctly. Okay? Self-efficacy is the one specific task. Growth mindset's my worldview. I can do it all. Okay? This is where I want to interject with why I'm not a fan of the growth mindset. I'm also skeptical of self-efficacy, but not nearly as much. Growth mindset to me is a big issue. And this is my opinion. You can disagree with me. I actually encourage you to disagree with me. So both self-efficacy and growth mindset are about resilience. And resilience refers to students' ability to overcome circumstances. It's a psychological term, right, where it's typically referred in correspondence with ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, such as abuse, poverty. And the idea is the more resilient a person is, the better chance they have at overcoming their ACEs. So self-efficacy and growth mindset both are models for building resilience in students. They're both models at trying to increase personal resilience. And self-efficacy would obviously be more a specific learning target versus growth mindsets like this worldview. I can overcome it all. So they both say that the solution is that goals, hard work can overcome any situation. This is where I get like my struggle comes from this. So the growth mindset is so focused on this forward-looking perspective on life. You know what? I'm not going to let anything hold me back because I can do it. I can do it. I can overcome it. My challenges, they don't matter because I'm going places. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to be the first person in my family to get a degree. I'm going to get a stinking master's degree or a doctorate. I'm going to go become rich because I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to work hard. I'm never going to stop working hard. I have my goals. I'm never going to lose sight of them. Everything is forward looking. That's a problem for me personally, because research shows so much that as students are affected by those very ACEs, the hippocampus and the hypothalamus in the limbic system are actually chemically changed, and a student becomes less capable of looking at the future, right? The future becomes less important. So that's where we get this growth mindset, is we have a student who's literally anatomically been rewired not to think about the future. Physiologically, their brains don't look forward. And we say, you know what you need? You need to look forward. You need to look at the future and come up with some goals. That just bugs me. And I've seen it insult students more than help them. Quite frankly, that's why I dislike the growth mindset, is because every conversation I've had with actual students about the growth mindset has felt like an insult to them. It's kind of like, why don't you have goals? Why don't you look forward to college? You can do it. Don't you believe in yourself? And they're just trying to get a meal on the table. They're just trying to figure out what they're going to eat. They're just hoping they don't get beat when they get home. To me, it's somewhat insensitive, and I could go on a rant for an hour on this, because it's almost like looking at someone, because it is physical, it is physiological. It's almost like looking at someone, say, who's disabled and is in a wheelchair, and it's like, you know what your problem is? You need to walk. You know how awesome walking is? You just stand up. How come you don't know how? How come you can't just get out of your wheelchair, huh? Right? That's how I feel about the growth mindset, is it's like there's actual chemical and physical things happening in a brain that's been affected by trauma. So just shoving resilience down their throat isn't how you fix the problem. You fix the problem by saying, I can tell you're not really too focused about the test that's coming up. Do you think I could just study with you today? Because I think we could do it together. And then guess what? They come to your classroom and you give them a snack. That's what they need in that moment, not more lecturing on growth mindset and goals. You say, let's get you some food. Hey, I got this for you. I got you this food for you. Or, hey, I know that home's not a great place for you to study. Why don't we do it together? Why don't you come to my room? Right? You create a safe space for those students. You don't just tell them, get a goal and go home and do it on your own. You do it with them. They need camaraderie. They need companionship. They don't need the growth mindset always shoved down their throat. So, again, I think self-efficacy is fine because it's a little bit more task-focused. And you can say, I think we need to make a goal of getting this task done together. Let's do it. But growth mindset, not a huge fan. I also just got to notice I'm almost out of time. I think I'm just going to have to really let you guys read this on your own real quick. Go to the slides and finish these last two slides on your own. And then I'll explain your assignment in another video. See ya!